This morning, I want to continue in a series that we began that was called New Year, New Rhythms. How is it that we can infuse with just some basic adjustments to the life that we're doing it as we're doing it now, some fresh wind as we become crosswind, some fresh wind in the Spirit in our own lives. Last week, we talked about how we could do that in spiritual ways, but this morning, I want to talk about New Year, New Rhythms relationally. How is it that we can infuse the possibility of some fresh investments in the life of our relationships? Peter and Paul will be those from whom we're getting this advice as they wrote the New Testament. And it's interesting that as Peter and Paul write, their encouragement is for us to bless our spouses. Bless your spouse. Now that's interesting that word comes from them when they start talking about how being a Jesus follower redirects and infuses your relationships with new power. They immediately went to marriage. For some of us, that's not relevant this morning. Maybe we're not married yet, or we've been married, but we're not married now, or we may be looking forward to marriage, but all of these principles that will emerge in a marriage is just a more intense environment for male to female relationships, however you know them. You know, if this could help me in my relationship with my mom, okay? So hopefully this will be widely applicable and so forth, but we would just want to find some possibilities to enrich this part of our lives together this morning. Anybody else out there got some relationships you'd like to enrich? Anybody got any relationships? God help us. Some of us have some relationships. Okay, good. Good. So we're going to apply this. And just, I remember it wasn't long ago that Charlie Kirk passed away. And his passing, he's almost impacted the world more in his passing, I think, than in his living days. It's magnified his message. A whole new generation is falling in love with Jesus in a miraculous way. We haven't seen this kind of move, especially in the United States. In decades and decades, Christ followers sincere Christ followers are being made and found all over the place. And whether or not you agreed with Charlie's political approaches and his political priorities, he was a Jesus follower. And one way I was so impressed that he was really on track was by the way he functioned as a husband because he was a Jesus follower. Do you remember at the funeral, his wife, is it Erica? Erica, beautiful young lady, and his wife said that he on a regular basis, almost weekly, would ask her this question: what more can I do to bless you? My wife elbowed me. What an incredible thing to do. Guys, what a gutsy thing to do. Huh? Because if she answers, then you're on the hook, right? Is this wisdom? To ask your wife how it is that you can bless her? Ladies, would it be wisdom for you to ask your husbands how it is that you can bless them? Not only Charlie Kirk, but Paul and Peter, from whom I think he takes this advice, would say yes. Look at 1 Peter 3, verses 8 and 9. Now, this is the conclusion of his comments on marriage. And so it begins with this word, finally, right? Finally, all of you meaning both husbands and wives. He's applied these principles to both genders, to both the husband and the wife. But now he concludes this way: finally, all of you have unity of mind. Be sympathetic. Have brotherly love. Be friendly. All of us as husbands and wives know that we are supposed to love each other. Most of us, even as husbands and wives, know that the other loves us. We're just not always sure all the time they like us, right? Be kind. Let your relationship be seasoned with brotherly love, a tender heart, rather than a harsh tongue, and a humble mind. Know that there's always things about this relationship that you can learn. A humble mind. Do not repay evil for evil or reviling for reviling. And I think the word the reviling is used as Peter said previously that Jesus, even though he was horribly mistreated, did not revile against those who spat upon him in reciprocity. Some scriptures actually say, instead of reviling, do not repay evil for evil or insult for insult. I know you're all way too spiritual for that to ever happen in your marriages. But on the contrary, bless. Bless each other. For to this you were called. By who? By God. By Jesus Christ. He's the one who's called you to live this way as a husband and wife. He calls all of us as followers of Jesus to live this way. It just breaks down most easily with those that we're closest with. But bless one another, for to this you were called, that you may obtain a blessing. How many of you got married in order to develop your character? Oh dear, I think that you're really the one for me, because I can tell that when we get married that you're going to make a better man of me. That's not usually the motivation, is it? Well, what's going on? When you decide that this is the other person, or even when you're just excited about a relationship, isn't it usually because you find that being with this person is in an atmosphere of mutual blessing? And that's what God designed marriage for. That by coming together under His lordship, He would so bless each of us that we would become the blesser, having received His blessing of another, of that one closest to us, especially of our wife or our husband. Now, this is really simple math, but lots of times it breaks down. Now, that's His final word. But in the verses before, He's talked specifically to wives with a challenge to them, and specifically to husbands. Look back up at how this chapter begins, 1 Peter 3, verses 1 and 2. He says, likewise, wives, be subject to your own husbands, so that even if some of your husbands do not obey the word, they may be won without even a word by the conduct of their wives, when they see your respectful and pure conduct, your respectful behavior. Now, there is that word there, be subject, submit to. Same language that Paul and Peter use, the exact same language. Both of them say, wives, respect your husbands. Husbands, love your wives, laying your life down for her, right? Both of them use the exact same language, and they both use a specifically different term as the task, depending upon which gender you are. If you're men, since you don't naturally speak the language of love, He challenges you to do something that takes a little effort, that you would love your wife. And though men grow up just instinctively understanding a language of respect, it's what's spoken on our football and basketball teams. It's the language of generals as they take us into combat. The language of respect is just natural for us. Love, not so much. Ladies, it's the other way around. He commands you to respect your husband. And this is important. He tells men to agape their wives, to love their wives. It's an unconditional kind of love. You ladies would be absolutely appalled if I was to tell your husbands, love your wives, but only when she's lovable. And it works the same way the other way around. Wives, respect your husbands. Yes, treat them respectfully, even if they're not always respectable. He may belch. It's not respectable. But don't belittle him when he does. That would be disrespectful. Is it right for him to belch? No. Can he stop it? Maybe not. But each of us, depending upon our gender, the scriptures, without calling a lot of attention to it, consistently and repeatedly call us as husbands and wives to sensitize ourselves to behave in such a way that's not our natural inclination. Guys don't naturally love. They don't connect. They get beside one another and they work on something. They don't sit across a table with little doilies and stare into each other's face and just relate to one another. If they did, guys would get up and leave because it felt so uncomfortable. Are you with me? Guys, am I right? God commands us each to do something that's a little out of our usual. Wives, respect your husbands. Men, love your wives. Not to just be hard on us, right? It's difficult. It's difficult for men to love. It's difficult for women to maybe speak in the language of respect. Yeah, it's difficult, but it's so worth it. And he tells you why. Likewise, wives, be subject to your own husbands, so that even if some of your men do not obey the word, maybe they're not a Christian, or maybe they're a Christian and they don't just follow. Maybe they're not reciprocating your love, but they may be won even without a word. Listen, because your respectful behavior has that kind of impact on them. You don't speak respect, but they do. And whenever you do, it makes an incredible impact on them. You think respect's not any big deal. It's like dropping a pebble on a pond. It makes a very little ripple. But if it leaves your hand as a pebble, know that it lands in their pond as a boulder. Go boom, right? It's a cannonball off the high dive in their world. Now, there were years ago when I've preached this many times, love and respect. It's just such an incredible, profound biblical principle that's now being proven. Gottman and the University of Michigan did one of the best longitudinal studies on relationships of husband and wife that's ever been done. Many people would point to it as the most authoritative study of relationships of husbands and wives ever. And he came down to the same exact principles, that the things that make a relationship thrive in a marriage is love and respect. And the opposite of that is what shuts them down and almost always leads to divorce, and that's a spirit of contempt for the other person. Scientifically proven. What Peter and Paul, I think, because they had been married, they're two of the apostles that we can almost say for certain were married. Paul had to have been married, or he couldn't have been a Pharisee of Pharisees. Pharisees were required to be married before they could be installed as Pharisees. He had been a Pharisee of Pharisees before he became a Christian, right? So Paul must have been married, even though by that time his wife, we think, may have passed away, or maybe there was some other reason that she didn't accompany him after that time. But we think that Paul was probably married. Peter, we almost know for sure, was married, because after Jesus spoke at the synagogue in Capernaum, he went over to Peter's house, and there, who was sick? His mother-in-law. So if he had a mother-in-law, you don't get those without getting a wife. Most guys don't go looking for a mother-in-law, right? So these guys were married. They had discovered the hard way, the way these dynamics work in a relationship. And they were trying to sensitize ladies to realize you can have such an impact on your husband just by the way that you communicate your respect. You have no idea the level of influence you have, ladies, if you'll risk this, which may seem counterintuitive to you. I had a lady in our church years ago. This was almost 20 years ago. She doubted this. She came up to me after a sermon and she said, "You can't really believe what you just preached." And I said, I absolutely do. And she said, this won't work with my husband. Her husband wasn't coming to church. He wasn't a churchgoer at the time. They had a very habitually conflicted relationship. She was really struggling in a relationship. She just couldn't believe. And she wasn't about to go there. After all the woundedness and hurt in her relationship, she didn't feel like her husband had earned respect. And she wasn't about to give it. She was not going to lay herself down as a doorman. That's not what we were talking about. But she was not going to go there. And I said, just try this. Let's do a little of experiment and see if this will work. She says, what's one thing? I said, what's one thing you have a hard time motivating your husband to do? She says, he will not take out the trash. And I said, okay. I said, let's do this then. I want you today, when you go home, not to criticize him for not taking out the trash, disrespect, not to cajole him or push him as if he's a child that needs to be reminded to take out the trash. That would read as disrespect with him. I want you to walk over to him, and I want you to, ladies, you can do this right now if you're sitting with your husband. I want you to grab his bicep with your hands, and I want you to squeeze it. Now, ladies, if you just did that, I can almost certainly tell you what he just did. He just flexed. Right? And then I want you to say, I challenged her, I want you to say, ooh, you're so strong. Would you do me a favor and take out the trash? She came back the next Sunday. Pastor, you would not believe this. This was incredible. I've never had this kind of influence with my husband before. I did exactly what I squeezed in. Ooh, you're so strong. And then I said, would you be willing to take out the trash? He almost ran to the kitchen, picked up tied it off, looked at me with a big smile, stuck out his chest, put back his shoulders, and almost ran outside to the canister. What else can I do? Respect. Now, since both you and your husband have heard this morning, don't go home and play that. But I would bet that if you did, it would still work. It would still work. It has that kind of influence. Now, that's a bit of a joke. But the truth of the matter is, on a soulish level that's even deeper than we men can explain it, respect has a way of making us square our shoulders and take on responsibility and be willing to serve. Ladies, if you want to really, really bless your son, don't tell him that you love him. Do tell him that. He needs to know that you love him too. But that I'd be willing to bet that your son knows you love him. But if you want to energize him to be obedient in the home, to be the best young man he can possibly be, don't say, honey, I love you. Say, son, I'm proud of you. It'll make a room get cleaned that hadn't been cleaned in a year. This stuff is this powerful. Now, as I'm talking to women right now about this mystery of how men respond to respect, men know this. You don't have to be taught this. It's absolutely instinctive. A general, guys, we could be stand at our attention right now, and I could be your general. I could be telling you there's absolutely no way, given the odds, that we can succeed today. But just over that hill, would you walk into glory with me? I've never seen a group of men stand before me before that I would so be willing to give the last drop of devotion to serve with and die with today. St. Crispin's Day. Now, I'm just joking around, but I can almost tell you that while I was saying that, the hairs on the back of many men's necks stood up. Am I right, guys? Do you get that language? Does it make you want to be your best? Does it make you want to serve? When someone treats you with respect, it makes you want to lay down your life for them. It's just natural to a well-intended male for that to be the reaction. But in verse 3:7, 1 Peter 3:7, he talks to husbands, and he says, likewise, husbands, live with your wives in an understanding way, Guys, say understanding. Okay? In an understanding way, not in an instinctive way, not in the way you would expect, not in the way that necessarily makes sense to you, but in an understanding way, understanding that she as a female is different than you. What's going to be effective will require a different approach. Showing honor to the woman. It's not that women don't need to be respected too. Showing honor to the woman as a weaker vessel. Oh, well, there you go, putting down women again, a weaker vessel. No, that's not what's being said here. It's not that she's a lesser person. The very next verse says that she is a fellow heir of the grace of life. In Jesus' eyes, she is just as important, just as valuable, just as worthy as any man could be. It says it in the very next phrase. When he calls her a weaker vessel, he's saying, no, she is fine china. Don't treat her like a kitchen skillet. You don't bang around. You don't treat her harshly. She's fine porcelain. She's to be cherished. Ladies, am I speaking your language now? She's to be cherished. She's to be cared for. She's to be treated in just such a way, in an understanding way. But because she's a different kind of vessel than you are, guys, we can be harsh with our buddies. And it just bounces off. That's kind of the playful language of respect. But it crushes a woman. Since she is an heir with you of the grace of life, so that your prayers may not be hindered. Are you kidding me? Are you saying that if I treat my wife harshly, that my prayers might be hindered? Yes, that's exactly what that's saying. Why would Paul and Peter conclude that, even make that kind of connection? Do you notice it says likewise? Likewise, women, likewise, men. All right, if you follow the likewise that we're being likewise, what are we being like? Go up to the scripture or the verse just before all of this on marriage unfolds. And you'll find Peter talking about the example that Jesus Christ has been to all of us. Jesus wanted more than anything else to bless us. He is the example of how to bless others. How did he do it? He did it by giving of himself. He did it by making sacrifices. He did it by not wanting himself to be served, but by willing to be a servant. Are you with me? So with Jesus as that example, let me explain. I want you to... is my wife here? Sometimes when she comes in late, she sits in the back. I don't see her. Okay, imagine this. Imagine this. I'm going to stay up here. Imagine this, that Cheryl is right in front of me, right? And we're in an argument, right? And I'm going to imagine that just over her shoulder is Jesus. Right? And this whole time that I'm in this argument with Cheryl, Jesus is just over her shoulder saying, no. Don't respond to that. Don't reciprocate that insult for insult. You with me? Unto me, Chris. Unto me. You see, there's this cycle. When a man is respected, he naturally wants to serve, which a woman perceives as love. And when a woman is truly loved, it's natural for her to be respectful towards the one who loves her. It works in the positive direction too, but it also works in the negative direction. Are you with me? Without love, she reacts defensively without respect. You've seen that, haven't you? In your own household. We might not have realized, the guys, that we've been unloving, but all of a sudden she turns snide and critical and snappy, and if my buddy talked to me like that, I'd pop him in the mouth. But this is my wife. She's a weaker vessel. I got enough sense to know that I'm not going to respond to her that way. So if I'm not going to respond to her the way I would respond to somebody who understands the language of respect, which she's just stepped all over, the best I can usually do is just retreat. I withdraw. I clam up. I go into the other room. But that doesn't feel like being loved to her. When she is, when he is, feels disrespected, he responds naturally in ways to her that is read as unloving. If I walk out of the room, I'm not loving my wife, I'm respecting my wife. I'm not responding disrespectfully to her, but I'm not loving her according to her language. I've just abandoned her. I've just walked out. This isn't coupling. This isn't coming together. This isn't reporting so that you can build rapport. This isn't any of that. This is me trying to control myself, not respond in an angry fashion or a harsh fashion, which would be definitely seen as unloving. And sometimes I can get there too. But I'm withdrawing because I think at least that's the better option that I can handle. But to her, she doesn't read that as loving. She reads that as abandonment. So is she now going to respond in a respectful way to a guy who's walking out of the room? No, she's going to chastise him, walk after him, and call him a coward. Does that sound respectful? No. You call a man a coward, you've about done the most brutal, worst thing you could ever. Guys, if another guy calls you a coward, what's likely to happen? It's on. It's on, right? But she's not meaning to be mean. She's meaning to turn him around. She's meaning to provoke him to love. Come on, tough guy, Mr. Iron Skillet. Turn around and connect. Turn around and engage. Don't walk away from me, please. Because that feels like just one or two conversations away from you saying goodbye forever. And her heart's panicking. Hey, don't walk away. Right? And we just start to spin in craziness. Sometimes we need to learn how to speak each other's language. I wish I could spend more time unpacking that for you this morning, but I want to lift up a few more ways that we can better speak each other's language. But here's the scriptural principle. Like Jesus, because he was honoring God, picked up that purpose of going to a cross and dying for us, he was willing to pay the price to bless us. In our marriages, wives and husbands, will we be willing to pay the price to learn another's language, to defer to them, to speak in ways that bless their hearts? Will we be willing to suffer even in order to bless the one that God calls us to bless? And the reason it will hinder our prayers if we don't is, how can we, guys, the Jesus that so respected us that he laid down his life for us, like the buddy that just took the bullet for us, if he's willing to do that, but we are not willing to take a punch verbally and turn a different cheek towards our wives, doesn't it make sense that God then has little respect for our prayers? That's what Peter and Paul are saying. This isn't easy stuff, but it's transformative and dynamic stuff. We need to learn to speak the other's language. I've got a little app on my phone. Maybe you've seen this, the iTranslate app. Have you seen the iTranslate app? It'll convert in real time anything you say in English to whatever other language you choose on the app. You aware of this stuff? It's amazing. 100+ languages. I couldn't even put 30 of them on there. It's so small. Arabic, Chinese. I try to put them in alphabetical order: Dutch, English, Filipino, French. Now, if you really wanted this app to go viral, I mean, get bigger, more giga than Google, if you really wanted that, all this app would have to do is add 2 categories. And that is a translation app that would help me as a male speak female, or would help my wife as a female to speak male. That's a lot of the reason for our tensions and our conflict as husbands and wives. I can't get too much more into this morning on that particular thing, but it's not just with husbands and wives, it's person to person. Sometimes we speak different love languages, according to Gary Chapman. Have you studied this before? It's absolutely foundational, I think, in relationships, that we both express love and receive love sometimes in different ways. Do you know what your love language is? My love language is acts of service. When I really love someone, I will do things for them, right? My wife's love language is quality time. What's it actually called? Quality time. What do you think is the most difficult thing for a pastor to give his wife? Quality time, right? But it doesn't work. So if I'm going to really have an impact with my efforts to bless Cheryl, this is going to take some sacrifice on my part. Does that make sense? I'm going to have to choose this. Now, why would I choose this? Because I know that quality time with Cheryl will mean more in blessing her than if I work in the yard all day long, right? This was revolutionary for me. I would get upset after having worked in the yard all day long, and then what do you do, guys? Hey, honey, come look. What do you think? Notice how it's edged just perfectly. There's none of that weird, that's amateur stuff. Look at that. Look at that. That's like a bullet shot right down that sidewalk right there. You know what I mean? And Cheryl would come out and she'd go, honey, that looks great. That looks great. And she'd walk back inside. And I'd go, right? Because I express myself in acts of service. But let's say then I go inside after having worked in the yard all day and sit down at the kitchen table while she's washing dishes and just ask her a question and attentively listen to what she says. She will feel more loved in that 15 minutes than with the 15 hours of labor that I have just put in the yard. Okay, think. Which is wiser for me to do if my goal is to bless her, to speak her love language? Ladies, do you know what your love language is? Do you know what the love language is of your husbands, boyfriends and girlfriends? Hey, I'm going to save you a lot of time and money here. Understand what the love language is of that other person, and you will much quicker, with much less effort, and with much more insight, do this in an understanding way. If it requires understanding, things that aren't intuitively accessible, then let me ask you not only to do that, to speak their language, but number 2, to ask their opinion. My wife got me for Christmas a little box. It's got 150 cards in it, and on each card is another question. Another question that we can ask one another about our relationship, about our preferences, about our history, about our heart, about our bucket list, about our dreams, about our fears. Hundreds of questions that help us ask, not assume we understand the other. Ask questions. Finally, I just want to say this morning, one of the best ways that you can bless one another as a couple is if you learn and find a way, if you prioritize, if you sacrifice to have a way that you serve the Lord together as a couple. If you can find that possibility within our church, you have found a gold mine in blessing each other. It is so effective, as a matter of fact, that years ago, do you know where affairs were most likely to break out in a church? It was common knowledge. The choir. The choir. And this makes perfect sense if you understand that those women and men who were up there just singing beside each other were sharing in a common purpose, in a common ministry, serving their common Lord. They were in touch with that relationship with Jesus as they were ministering to one another, and it was just more natural for it to overflow to one another than their spouse who is at home who doesn't happen to sing in the choir. It's so powerful. It can even, what if it was working for you? One of the coolest places of new ministry in our church that's about to get started is we will have something called a starting point class. And in the starting point class, it'll just last for 3 weeks. But the design of the starting point class is not just to come in and learn about yourself and learn about Jesus and learn about how you can serve and find your niche within the church. It'll be all about that. But it'll be really about also building relationships for those 3 weeks with these other new people that are coming to our church, and with a couple, a husband and wife probably, who are also hosts at that particular table, helping us lead that conversation. And because that husband and wife have already been involved in the church, there'll be natural guides to help them make connections, not just think about it or conceive it, but actually know who to talk to, where to get involved, how to experiment with it, all that kind of stuff, and to help us really experiment with walking into the life of our church more fully. I've never been more excited about a new members class ever in my entire life, and it's leveraged completely on these relationships that we'll be building with this host couple and these new people as they come in. I wonder for some of you, I just wanted to plant that seed before we got away today, that some of you as husband and wife have never really found that place. Even within the church, guys, you've done guy things, girls, you've done girl things, but you haven't found that place of ministry together. And it can be powerful to know that you're not just blessing each other, but the blessing of each other is overflowing in blessing to still others. You want to get blessed. Put your relationship in that position. But no matter what shape your relationships are this morning, you may not even be married, but maybe you've heard something this morning that could be a way of infusing new life into a relationship that you're thinking of. You know, the place to start, it's not hoping that they'll change. It's not saying, well, if you just get around to loving me, then I'd respect you a lot more. It's not you saying, well, if you just respect me, I'd be a lot more loving. It's not in the reciprocity. It's in who is always just over their shoulder. And he's saying, no, I always respect you, man. And he's saying to her, I always love you. I'll never leave you nor forsake you. I lay down my life for you, right? And from that constant source of what you need to have life, from that source, having the resources to give what might not even be reciprocated for a while in that relationship that you have to bless. Let's start there this morning at that certain source.